out of the observatory, so this will never happen again.
I can't believe that extra thick layer of pollution that I've actually picketed against is what burned up the comet.
Well, what's really amazing is that this is exactly what Dad said would happen.
Yeah, Dad was right.
I know, kids. I'm scared too.
Welcome back to the Astrocast. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm your host, Rue. Thank you for joining us. Today is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. Suchinan Atlas is in the skies. C2023A3 has put on an absolutely beautiful show for us these past few days. And I just have to say, for starters, that this past week has been one of the best I can remember ever for astronomy. We had so many awesome things happen that it's hard to believe I was able to cram it all into one weekend. So we started off last week after I talked with you guys. I had mentioned that there had been some aurora the week before visible in North Carolina, but we actually had a KP 8.4 storm happen shortly after the episode went live. So that happened on Thursday night, and it was absolutely incredible. Again, just not quite as powerful as May 10th, but still absolutely incredible nonetheless. I wasn't able to travel up to the mountains like I did last time. If you were listening back in May, whenever we had the KP9 storm take place that caused all those incredible aurora that were visible all the way down to Puerto Rico. But nonetheless, it was a very powerful storm. I went outside, I think shortly after 8 o'clock, and just pointed my phone camera up at the sky and immediately saw the red tint that is, always a sure sign that aurora are happening right in your sky. And I very quickly gathered my gear. I told my wife earlier in the day that if there were a chance that it could happen, that I would definitely be going to view them. So I ended up meeting a close friend of mine at a graveyard that is probably a good, 10 miles outside of the city. Pretty nice dark skies out there, actually. Not quite like Bortle 3, 2, or 1. It is probably a 5 out there, but a really good quality 5. You can see the Milky Way. Not incredibly bright, but you can see it. It was slightly visible to us that night, even though the moon was out. And we didn't get a phenomenal show as far as colors are concerned. I was able to see a red tint in the sky, and then obviously long exposure photographs brought out the rest. I only got red in my photos this time, which doesn't surprise me too much. You have to be further up north, generally speaking, to get the greens and blues and all the other unique colors of aurora. But nonetheless, it was an amazing experience. I was super glad that my friend got to experience some aurora firsthand, because he was not able to join me back in May when I originally went. And even though I wasn't able to, head up to the mountains because I was too tired, it had been a very long day at work and I had been up since very early in the morning that day. I still got to see it, and just being able to experience those things to me is, half, if not more than half of the fun of it all. Getting the photographs and, doing the actual astronomy being the rest of it, but being able to get together with friends under the stars and really appreciate the beauty that our universe can bring to us on such a random occasion, like a Thursday night at 8 o'clock when normally I wouldn't be doing anything of import. It's just awesome because you make those memories, and hopefully you also have people that you were able to share it with as well. So after the Aurora event of Thursday night, Friday, I actually had plans already, so I wasn't able to do any astronomy Friday night, but Saturday night, I did get my scope out, and it was actually a beautifully clear night out. The moon was already pretty well below the trees because I got started kind of later in the evening, and I worked on the Pleiades actually. I had set my 135 scope up because my goal was to catch the gases that surround the Pleiades. And boy, oh boy, did I do that. I was able to capture those quite well. I was shooting at f2, so I just went ahead and made the 135 lens wide open, and I had my L Pro filter in there to filter out some of the light pollution that this area is very well known for. And I let it run for about 4 hours. So 4 hours at f2, just so you know, is definitely enough to bring out those gases that surround the Pleiades that are just incredibly beautiful. The end result photo, I'm not incredibly happy with. I need to reprocess it and take a little bit more time on it. I think I might have reduced the stars a bit too much. And they weren't really popping out in the Pleiades as much as they should. Those stars, the seven sisters, if you will, really should stand out in a good photo of the Pleiades. And I've done many photos of the Pleiades over the years, and some that I absolutely love, and others that, I'm not the biggest fan of. So end result, I was super happy to get what I was going for, which was those gases, but I do need to take some time and reprocess those images when I'm not in such a hurry, basically. And hopefully I can get a better end result. So that was Saturday night. I also saw some absolutely beautiful shooting stars on Saturday night while I was just sitting outside, enjoying the quiet and peacefulness and serenity that comes with stargazing that I'm sure all of you know. And there's just something about it when you're just looking up at the sky and you happen to see a really bright, slow moving, relatively speaking, shooting star that just seems to, fall from the stars, hence the name. And I saw several of those. I don't know if they're early Orionids because the Orionids do start later this month. But nonetheless, they were absolutely beautiful shooting stars that I was able to witness. So that made the night that much more special. I ended up around 3:00 in the morning. I don't know why, but I had an urge to get a decent photo of me with Orion in the background because Orion was just looking mighty behind me, high in the sky by that time at night. So I went inside and grabbed my R5 and a tripod, and I sat outside taking selfies for a few minutes at 3:00 in the morning, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But I had a lot of fun doing it, and I did get some pretty great pictures, I think. So that was Saturday night. And then Sunday night brought no doubt the biggest surprise of all. So we went out to see the comet. I had already imaged it back in September. In late September, I was able to see it before sunrise down in South Carolina and take a photo of it. But we all knew that the best of the show had yet to come, as we all expected. And boy, oh boy, it did not disappoint. It was absolutely breathtaking. So I ended up visiting the same spot, I think 4 times in total to see the comet. The last time actually being tonight on Wednesday. A friend messaged me, a friend Debbie, and she had not been able to catch it yet and asked if I was going. And I said, I wasn't planning on going, but if you'd like to go, I'd certainly love to meet you up there because I found a spot with a nice low horizon where we were able to view it. And so she said, yeah. So I ended up meeting her there shortly after sundown. I think around like 7:15-ish, we got there, and it wasn't as spectacular as Sunday night, but we were able to still see the comet naked eye. But Sunday night, wow, that was something else. So I had tried Friday and Saturday. Friday I had tried unsuccessfully. Saturday I didn't get a chance to look for the comet because we had dinner plans, and my astronomy ended up being later the night, like I told you about with the Pleiades. But Sunday, me actually got my wife to go, which is something incredibly rare. She usually doesn't join me for astronomical events, but I told her this was a special one, and I think she knew that it was going to be kind of special. So she actually decided to join me. And then while we were kind of sitting there waiting for it to come out, my buddy who goes with me on the dark sky trip every year ended up showing up. So the 3 of us sat out there watching, and sure enough, it came out. I was able to get it in the binoculars first. And after probably 15 minutes or so after we were able to first catch it in the binoculars, it became just incredibly apparent on the horizon, easily visible to the naked eye. In fact, it was so bright I was able to just take regular video of it with my camera, which was kind of shocking, because I didn't expect it to be that bright, but it was. And I got some just wonderful photos. I was able to capture the antitail, which, if you don't know, is actually a portion of light that shows up in front of the comet as it travels. It's often, seen in really good deep sky photos of comets. You'll see the antitail, but if you've got a bright enough comet, you can absolutely get it with just your regular old 5-second exposure. And I was able to capture that. And then while processing the photos, I actually got one with deer in the foreground. So there were 3 deer, and one of them appears to be looking up at the comet, which, for all I know, he was. And that was just absolutely incredible, because we had seen deer earlier in the night several times, and no one had noticed that they were in the field directly across from us while we were looking at the comet. So that was something really cool. I shared the photo online, but unfortunately it's hard to appreciate a photo like that on a tiny little smartphone screen. And I think for that reason, a lot of people couldn't truly appreciate how epic that photo was. But I'll share it with you guys if you want to have a look at it. I will put it, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. If you got photos of the comet, I would absolutely love to see them. So please, if you want to, tag me, hashtag the Astrocast on any platform that you use, and I will certainly do a search for them. Or you can obviously follow us on Facebook and then post them there in the comments, because I've got a few posts up from the comet over the last few days there as well. So just a really magical experience over the last week with astronomy. And like I say, I can't remember too many times where there have been so many cool astronomical events back to back. And it's a big deal when you open up your social media feed and 90% of it is photos of the comet. I mean, that was so cool just to see, people who normally would roll their eyes if I started talking about constellations around them, like, nah, but you're outside photographing the comet, because I think everybody can recognize how special it is to see something like that, that only comes around every 80,000 years. So, cavemen were likely viewing that comet 80,000 years ago. And now it's back for us to enjoy once more. So a special thank you to our friend, the comet, Suchinen Atlas, for gracing us with its presence. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, you certainly do still have an opportunity. I was out tonight. Like I say, it's Wednesday, October 16th, and I was able to still see it naked eye, albeit it was faint. I'm in a Bortle 6/5 in the area that I was at, I would say is a pretty fair bet. So if you have darker skies, absolutely, you can still see it. And if you don't have super dark skies, you can still take a long exposure photograph. It's kind of right in between Arcturus and Venus right now, and it's getting higher and higher each night. And it's significantly higher than it was just a few nights ago. So definitely in a position in the night sky where you will hopefully be able to see it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed all of these awesome events that we have seen over the last few nights. I know I certainly have. Thing I found interesting was the different focal lengths that I was taking photos of the comet at. Initially, I thought to myself, my 100 to 400 millimeter lens would be the best bet for this, but I actually think I got my best shots with my wider angle lens, which is a 24 to 70 f2.8. I think the 70 millimeter shots, taken at f4 in anywhere from 5 to 15 seconds, depending on how dark it was, ended up being the best shots. But I'd be curious to know what kind of shots you guys got. Feel free to email me if you'd like, ruastrocast@gmail.com. I would love to see them. If you don't want to tag me, that's fine. Shoot me an email, include them, and I would, like I say, absolutely love to have a look. So you guys may notice that I am talking a little bit quieter than I normally do. And the reason for that is it's actually kind of late at night. I normally record much earlier in the evenings, around 6 p.m. But I have not had the time to do that this week because I've been extremely busy with life. And in fact, we are leaving for a trip in a few days. Me and my wife are going to be taking a small break away from Charlotte. It's our 10-year anniversary. Well, it was in September, and we're celebrating this month by taking a little trip. Unfortunately, she got a little bit of a cold this week. Neither of us has been sick in years. And of course, she would catch a cold the week that we are set to go on our trip, for the first time in 3 years, I think. So very much looking forward to that. But with that being said, there will not be a new episode next week, unfortunately. I hate to do that. I hate missing a week, and I know I don't miss them very often. But family comes first. So you always got to make sure that you take care of your family and your mental health first before everything else. And I definitely need a week kind of away from everything just to do that reset, which I think is extremely crucial for all of us, especially in this day and age, to do. We work very hard, even though, we kind of live in the future now. That seems that way to me anyway, growing up as a 90s kid as I did. And we have all this great technology around us, but for whatever reason, it seems like we're just working ourselves to death on stranger and stranger things, sitting behind a screen for 10 hours a day, staring at spreadsheets and code and, whatever it is that you may do. It can be a little bit odd. And I think it's not healthy to continue doing that for extended periods of time without stepping away from it for at least a week to kind of let your mind reset, let your blood pressure go back down to a normal level, and those sorts of things. So it's something that I often preach, but unfortunately rarely practice. And I am going to make sure to practice it this week. I am going to disconnect. I'm going to try to stay away from social media for the most part. I know you hear that a lot, and I'm not doing that as one of those, oh, woe is me type things that you see online quite a bit, but rather for my mental health, I'd rather just kind of step away from it for the week. So if you follow me on any of the social media platforms, don't expect too much, but I think I will bring a camera with me, though. We're actually going up to Salem, Massachusetts, which is something I'm quite excited about. My wife is extremely excited about it. She's a big fan of Hocus Pocus, as am I. It's a great movie. It's a classic. We all watched it as kids and still enjoy it to this day. And obviously, the new one came out last year. It's not as good as the original, obviously, but it's still a great movie. So going up to Salem, we'll be able to see all the famous filming locations, the houses, that sort of thing. And obviously, the terrible atrocities that happened there with the killing of the so-called witches hundreds of years ago at this point. I love to, study the historical side anytime that I get to visit a really old town, and I'm very much looking forward to that as well. I thought about maybe playing an old episode while I'm gone, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'm not a big fan of old episodes airing when a new one can't come out. But what I am going to do is I'm going to prepare a very good, heavily astrophotography centric episode that we're going to be having when we return from this small break in a couple of weeks. I know I've talked a lot about the comet, the auroras, and all of the kind of crazy astronomical events that seem to be happening as of late. And we haven't had a really good, thorough discussion about astrophotography as of late. So I definitely plan to do that, doing a little bit of research right now on the specifics of the episode. So you definitely have that to look forward to in a couple of weeks here. And speaking of astrophotography, I actually saw a new product that was recently released from one of my favorite companies, which would be SVBONY. I think they make excellent gear for what it is. I know it's inexpensive compared to a lot of the higher end astrophotography brands, but I have a special place in my heart for SVBONY because my first telescope was, and I still use on a regular basis, an SVBONY 80 millimeter doublet telescope that I got for them shortly after they started making telescopes. And, nowadays they've got a lot more to choose from as far as what kind of gear that they have. And it looks like they are entering in to that Red Cat arena with the smaller, 50 to 70 millimeter aperture type scopes. And it looks like it's a new APO telescope / camera lens that is, for use with full frame cameras, or obviously deep sky cameras like your cooled astronomy cameras. And it looks like it's a pretty nice lens, actually. So it's a 5-piece Petzl design, and the Petzl design, if you don't know, is unique in that you do not have to worry about back focus whenever you're using this type of lens. I think a lot of the Red Cats are Petzl design, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess the big advantage to getting something like this over a Red Cat, as you might imagine, is price. So looking at their site, it looks like for $5.99 you can get the 54 millimeter f4.5 Astrograph, and it comes with quite a few accessories. Actually, it comes with the Vixen bar that you can mount it on, along with the ring that actually holds the telescope / lens, whatever you want to refer to it. We'll just call it the Astrograph. And on top of that bar, it actually has a spot for a guide scope. And it looks like they're running a deal where they include the mounting hardware, a guide scope, and a dew heater ring. So all of that for $5.99 looks pretty darn impressive. I do got to say, I would want to see some photos of this particular lens. I would want to make sure that the quality is at least, in the ballpark of something like a Red Cat, because it's $600, which is very inexpensive. I think similarly sized Red Cats go for around $900, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so the Red Cat 51 actually goes for right at about $900, and it's an f4.9 refractor. So, it's definitely a lot cheaper, about a third cheaper overall, but I don't know if the quality is there or not. That's the one thing that I have to kind of wonder about. So I'm quite curious to see if any of you guys maybe have had a chance to have a look at this lens. I haven't even gone on YouTube to see if any of the, telescope YouTubers, astronomy YouTubers rather, have gotten their hands on it. That'd probably be a pretty good place to start as far as image quality is concerned. So yeah, looking at YouTube, they actually have like an hour and 24-minute kind of pre-release video for this Astrograph lens, but I didn't see any readily apparent reviews or anything like that. So I'll be keeping my eyes on that segment, because as you guys know, I am looking to purchase a scope in that range. I don't know. It's kind of a hard proposition in my opinion, because, on the one hand, $600, that's a lot cheaper than $900. There's no doubt about it. But if I'm spending $600, would I be willing to just spend the extra $300 and get what I really truly want? I guess all of that will come down to image quality, because ultimately the specs look to be pretty much identical. I guess 3 millimeters more on the SVBONY, and it's a 4.5 instead of a 4.9. Though, as we know, sometimes companies will round those numbers up or down a little bit, depending on what, direction they're going in. It's kind of hard to say. I will say that the Red Cats now have a standard design for the focuser that is a rack and pinion type focuser. Whereas this new SVBONY uses the helical focuser. So you can't just, take a regular ZWI autofocuser out of the box and have it work. You have to use a belt drive system if you wanted to do that, and that adds more costs. So there's trade-offs either way that you spit it. But I'm definitely going to check them out. I'm going to look into it. If the image quality is very, very good, it's certainly something that I would consider, already owning several SVBONY products as I do. I guess kind of think of it, I own an SVBONY guide scope as well. And that's actually, I believe that's the guide scope that I use with my 135 rig. And it does provide excellent guiding. I use it with the ASI 120 which is an extremely popular miniature guide camera that, obviously works in tandem with your ASI Air or any other type of software that you would like to use it with. I've had good luck with that. I believe using a 30 millimeter guide scope, which I can't remember the exact focal length of that. I want to say it comes out to around 200 millimeters in focal length with those particular ones, the 30 millimeter ones. But I always get great guiding with my two scopes. But I suppose great guiding can be a little bit subjective depending on what you're going for. Like, for example, with my CEM 26 mount, usually if I can get around 0.8, I am extremely happy, but it's not uncommon for me to be a little bit above 1.0 with my guide numbers. Whereas surprisingly with my little Star Adventure GTI, it's not uncommon for that thing to get down to 0.5 or 0.6 on the guide numbers. And that's using, 135 millimeter objective lens, which is obviously not needing guiding that good. But hey, I'll take it if I can get it, because it ends up giving me, just really, really good looking stars. It's important with a lens like that, though. I was looking over some of my prior work, and it occurs to me that some of my star field photos, for a lack of better words, just whether it be a nebula or an actual open star cluster, just photos that have a lot of stars in them. I'm talking like, small Sagittarius star cloud. If you've ever looked at that through a telescope, you can really see a huge, huge difference in quality depending on the type of seeing conditions that you have with a lens like that. How good your focus is, how great it is, frankly, if I have to put it that way, because, I saw a couple of photos that had just absolute pinpoint stars all the way across the whole field. And then I've got other photos from that exact same rig where they're not that great, and some of that also can come down to filter choices, obviously. And, the moon being out, if I'm not doing like duo narrowband, which I try to usually do with that lens, but I do a lot more duo narrowband in the summertime because there's a lot more of those targets out than there are in the winter. With winter rolling around and we're, getting back to imaging Orion and these sorts of things, it's actually got me thinking about what the next filter is that I want to buy, which kind of leads me to my R5. I love my R5. It's a phenomenal camera. I got it on sale because there's no way I would be able to afford one brand new with how much Canon charges for them. But basically after they announced the R5 Mark II, they marked down the pricing significantly at the time for the R5. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to get one, because I've never been someone who needs to have like the newest, latest, greatest when it comes to camera tech. Honestly, if you can get a 45 megapixel full frame camera, it's not going to matter too much if it's 2 or 3 years old. It's still going to give you phenomenal photos. In fact, there are plenty of DSLRs out there that aren't even mirrorless cameras that can do absolutely breathtaking photos that are 10 plus years old. In fact, there's some channels on YouTube that I've seen of astronomers specifically taking like old Rebel T3Is that are astro modified. And these are cameras that are, almost 20 years old at this point in some cases. And they can still take absolutely breathtaking photos of nebula. So it really depends on what your use case is. For me, I use my R5 for a lot more than just astronomy. It's also my main photography camera, which is something that's very important to me. So I haven't done an astro modification on it yet because I want to be able to use it for, regular day-to-day photography. However, that being said, there is a lot of light pollution that I have to contend with. So like one of my favorite things to do is to take super wide field shots of just the night sky. So like to me, getting a 16 millimeter lens and pointing it straight up at the winter sky and catching every single constellation together is just amazing. I love doing that. But with all the light pollution that I have to contend with, that's not always an easy task to do. So what I was considering getting is a clip-in filter. So actually, whenever I first got into astrophotography a few years ago, my very first camera that I used was an Astro-modified T3i that I had purchased on Cloudy Nights Classifieds for, I believe, $200. I got it for, and that was, I guess, 4 years ago now. Not too long after I ended up upgrading to the 294 MC Pro camera. But I did use that Canon body for a while, and I got a very popular CLS clip-in filter to take care of light pollution. And that's the Astronomic CLS clip-in. And it was really awesome. I was very impressed by the difference that I would get with that filter versus no filter. It was quite literally night and day. Because it was able to block out so much of that unwanted light pollution. So I'm thinking something similar like that for my R5. I do know that Optolong actually makes like an L-enhance clip-in filter, which is their, essentially light pollution filter. And I don't know, it's $259. Astronomic also makes one for our cameras, which is, what I'm using. And I'm thinking that might be the move. It's a little bit less money. But I'm curious if any of you guys have used a clip-in filter on one of your newer mirrorless cameras, because if I could get one for under $200 and it's able to take care of the vast majority of the light pollution that I run into, I think that might be kind of a no-brainer to do. So I can take some, longer exposure photos of the night sky without going completely overboard. I'm talking like putting it on my Sky Guider Pro, which is just, a lightweight star tracker, essentially, with a wide field lens, and then getting 30 to 60 second exposures. So it doesn't need to be anything crazy. I'm not looking to do 3-minute auto guided subs with my R5, but I would like to be able to get, nice, beautiful Milky Way shots in the summertime, and maybe even try to get some from my house. But it just really depends on how well those light pollution filters work with these newer mirrorless cameras. So I realize that I won't be able to get as much of a return without it being an Astro modified camera. But again, I don't know if that's something that I'm willing to do with my R5, even though I know that you can technically get a clip-in UV IR cut filter that essentially can take the place of what all is removed from what I've read. There's a couple of sites out there that will do it for you, ship the camera to them. They'll do the modifications and send it back. But when I went and looked at those options, there were, I think 5 different options to choose from. And I was kind of like, basically couldn't ever possibly decide which one of those would be the right one for me. I could probably give them a call one day and ask them, describe my particular situation. And I'm sure that they'd be happy to suggest what the right modification would be, because I can't imagine that I'm the only one who has, a nice terrestrial photography camera who also wants to use it for deep space. Camera filters are so crazy if you start looking through them. Not just astronomy filters, but just camera filters in general can get very pricey, and there's all kinds of systems out there. There are magnetic systems where you can swap them in and out and just have a magnetic clip-on filter that can go onto the front of the lens. And then you have your drop-in filters as well, like the Canon cameras. And I'm sure Nikon and all the other manufacturers do it as well, where you can essentially get a speed booster that goes between your camera and your lens. And it'll essentially increase by 1 stop, usually, I believe, your f-stops. And then you can drop in filters in between. So if you wanted to do like a neutral density filter, an ND filter, that would be, a good way to go about doing it. I was actually thinking an ND filter would have been an awesome way to go for the comet that we had in the night sky, because it started becoming very apparent to me through the binoculars before it was very dark outside. So I was thinking it would be kind of cool if you had like a 1000 ND filter and put that on the front of the lens, and then did, like a 60-second tracked exposure of the comet while it's still sunglasses for your camera is essentially what an ND filter is. So I could absorb more of that light from the comet while not blowing out the photo because, it's still dusk outside. So that was something that crossed my mind while I was out shooting it. But I don't own a whole lot of filters outside of my astronomy filters that I own. But I probably should, at a minimum, invest in a really good ND filter. I've got a cheap one that's, I think, an adjustable ND filter where you can twist it and make it less tinted and twist it the other way and make it more tinted, and then, just adjust it as needed. But there are a lot of different situations that I've run into over the years where it would be very nice to have like a polarizing filter, for example. Or when you're doing like a long exposure of water and you want to, get that nice, smooth flowing water kind of look, that's when a good quality ND filter could come in extremely handy. So definitely something worth thinking about, but man, oh man, they are pricey. You will spend a lot of money on filters if you want to, particularly if you start getting into some of the really nice, like 3 nanometer filters that they make for astronomical purposes, where it eliminates every other light band except that one tiny little slice of the light spectrum that you're wanting to go for. Like, let's take ASCAR, for example, because they're a very popular filter and telescope company, obviously, but they make a 2-inch duo narrowband filter. So duo narrowband's extremely popular for one-shot color cameras because you're able to recreate a Hubble palette, essentially. Hubble palette, if you don't know, was popularized by the Hubble telescope because they, color specific light frequencies in specific colors that they chose. And obviously, as astrophotographers, we tend to emulate things like the Hubble telescope, and a duo narrowband filter will allow you to do that with a regular one-shot color camera, whereas regularly you would need to use a mono camera and capture these signals individually, such as oxygen and hydrogen. But by using a duo narrowband, you'll capture those two particular slices of the light spectrum and then be able to separate them in post-production while you're working on it in PixInsight or whatever program it is that you use. But I paid, I want to say $200 for my L Pro. And then I paid a little bit more for the L Extreme F2 one that I use with my F2 lens, obviously the Rokinon 135. I thought that was crazy expensive, but boy, oh boy, I don't know anything because the ASCAR Color Magic 2-inch duo narrowband filter goes for $539, and it must be popular because it's on back order pretty much everywhere I looked. So the only thing with 3 nanometers is, it is an extremely small band of light. I think a lot of the other more common duo narrowband filters will be somewhere like 5 to 7 nanometers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's 7 actually. So like an SVBONY, for example, they make a pretty popular dual band filter, significantly less expensive than something like the ASCAR that we were just talking about, obviously, but it is 7 nanometers instead of 3 nanometers. So it's a little bit broader of a spectrum of light, and therefore might not give you as high of quality because it's not able to, cut out quite as much of the unwanted light as you might otherwise have with something like a 7 versus a 3. So just all things to consider. I will say after you get your initial telescope set up, you get your mount, obviously always comes first. And then you pick out your telescope, your camera, your auto guiding system, and that sort of thing. The next place people always go to is going to be filters because they can give you, the biggest change in the quality of your images for the least amount of money, relatively speaking. But just really do your research on them. Places like Cloudy Nights are just excellent resources for reading about various filters. There's lots of reviews on various filters on there. I will say I am a firm believer of the buy once, cry once mentality, which is to say, don't cheap out when you're buying your filters. Like, for example, when I bought my first L Pro filter, I bought a 1.25 inch version because I thought that that was all that I would ever need. Now, that was just because I was ignorant at the time and didn't realize how much more beneficial a 2-inch filter can be. Now, when I got a camera with a wider imaging circle, rather, a wider sensor. I'm sorry. The imaging circle is going to be the telescope. Anyway, I got a camera that had a bigger sensor, and the 1.25 inch is not enough to cover it without getting vignetting and other artifacts. It doesn't work as well with the filter wheel that I wanted to go with. 1.25 inch. You want to use a 2-inch filter with this particular 5-way filter wheel. So these are just like little things that I didn't know at the time when I bought it, but I would suggest that you read up on it if you are thinking about buying filters. I will say, just like without even thinking about it, I would definitely recommend a 2-inch filter over a 1.25 inch filter, unless you very specifically know that you are never going to use a 2-inch filter because you're buying a rig that will work with 1.25 inch ones and you will never need anything more than that. If you're not 100% sure of that, then spend a little bit of extra money and get the 2-inch filter, because ultimately it'll last you longer. It'll give you something that you can grow into, and good quality filters, they can last a lifetime. If you take good care of them, the coatings are, good on good quality filters and they will last. So, if it's not in my telescope, it's right back in the case. And they, all the filters that I bought have come with good solid cases with good cushioning in them and everything. So if, like I say, if it's not in the telescope, it's in the case. And otherwise it's not going to be exposed to anything. So there's really no reason that a filter like that shouldn't last me 10, 20 years. Assuming I don't drop it whenever I pull it out of the filter drawer that I have. I actually haven't bought a filter wheel yet. I would like to get one, but I think ultimately it just makes more sense for me to get my first filter wheel when I move to mono, which is something that I'm planning on doing in the spring. I'm looking at my first mono cameras. I'm leaning 2600 but I kind of want to wait and see if anything new is going to come out, because the prices on those haven't really changed much at all since I've gotten into astrophotography, and I'm quite curious to see if something newer is going to come out in the near future and maybe lower the price on those to a place where it's, significantly more affordable. I know the color version of the 2600 can be bought for, I think $14.99. And then your ASI Air version with the guide camera built in is like $2,000 now. I think they call it the 2600 Air. Kind of crazy to think that we can combine the camera, the guide camera, and the computer all into one device. I'm not really a fan of that. That's just one point of failure for too many devices. Whereas, if my, guide scope or guide camera goes out on me, I can always swap it out for another one. But if your $2,000 camera decides that the one USB port doesn't work anymore, what are you going to do? That could be a really, really big problem. So I don't know if I ever see myself getting something like a 2600 Air, just because that's kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket. And I'm not a fan of doing that. But if you got the money, certainly worth considering, I suppose. But for me, I think ultimately I'll probably go with the mono 2600 and then get a 5 or 7 spoke wheel. What do you call them? 7 filter wheel. I suppose that would be it. 5 or 7 filter wheel. I think the 5s can hold larger filters, but there probably is a 7 out there that are hold 2-inch filters. I would be willing to bet. So it just depends, I suppose, but I'll keep you guys posted on what I ultimately decide to go with. All right, guys. So I'm going to cut this one a little bit short just because it's almost 11:30 and I got to be at work tomorrow morning. I got one more day of work and then I'm going to be off for 10 days. I'm very much looking forward to it, though I am quite nervous because I'm going to be leaving my team alone for 10 days and I hate doing that to them. I worry something bad will happen. I worry if I'm gone for one day that something bad will happen. I can't imagine 10 days is going to be nerve wracking, but what are you going to do? We all got to take a break at some point, right? So I hope you guys don't miss me too much next week. I will certainly be back the following week, which is going to be the week of Halloween. So maybe we'll do something a little bit special for a Halloween episode of the Astrocast. So you certainly have that to look forward to. And as far as a recommendation this week, I think I'm going to dig back into the bucket of something I likely recommended long time ago. Probably on one of the earliest episodes. I'm quite sure that I have mentioned this app at some point, but I've been using it a good bit as of late to check conditions because I've been lucky enough to have a lot of very nice conditions over the last couple of weeks. The app is called Good to Stargaze, and it is just a beautiful, very simple, very easy to read application that will tell you whether or not it is good to stargaze in your area. It's available on iOS and Android, and it gives you things like the current weather, the current visibility, if it's cold out, if it's windy out, if there's a chance for rain. It'll tell you the cloud cover, the seeing conditions, the transparency. It even tells you what planets are visible in the night sky at any given time. Obviously, the moon phase is included, astronomical darkness when it happens, etc. And it'll even tell you your Bortle on the Bortle scale. It's a free application. It's very, very nice. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I've been using it for years. Obviously, there are other competitors out there. There's awesome websites like astropheric.com, which can give you really great in-depth details. I actually have a computer out in my garage that runs Astropheric 24/7, and I have a monitor set up that is always showing the homepage of Astropheric, so I can just at a glance know what the conditions are for that night and what the moon phase is and all those sorts of things. Other than that, I would recommend that you guys spend a night out under the stars. I got to do that last Saturday, and it occurred to me that I had done a lot of astrophotography nights, but it had been a little while since I had just sat out under the stars for a few hours and really kind of took in the sights. We're getting into the time of year where Orion is coming back around, and there's something really special about sitting underneath Orion and Taurus and the Pleiades and, Pollux and Castor, and just the whole winter constellations are upon us. And get outside, bundle up a little bit, put on a flannel, get a nice warm knit hat if you got one, or a beanie. Get out your zero gravity chairs. I know I've recommended those in the past. If you don't have a zero gravity chair, I highly encourage you to get one. You can get them very, very inexpensive on Amazon. And it's incredible. You can just lean straight back and look straight up at the sky. We have upcoming meteor showers over the next couple of months. The Leonids are going to be occurring in November, which is, just a little over a month away right now. So we certainly have beautiful things on the horizon. Get outside and look at them, even if you normally set your scope up and then go back inside, or maybe you are a remote observer who sets up their telescope in, Arizona while you image it from New Jersey. That's okay. But maybe take a weekend and drive out to a dark site and sit outside for a few hours and really kind of take it all in and appreciate what the universe has to offer, because there is plenty to see for those of us that are willing to look. So guys, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me for almost an hour this week. I know it's a little bit short, but I promise you, we are going to come back on the week of Halloween, and we are going to hang out for an hour and talk strictly astrophotography now that the comet will be gone at that point for all intents and purposes, from the vision of ourselves in the night sky. So we'll sit down and we'll chat astro next time when I return. So wish me luck on my trip. Hopefully we'll get decent weather. Hopefully my wife will get over her cold, and very, very, very hopefully I will not catch it, because I kind of feel like I might have something coming on right now. I can't say for sure, but I haven't been sick in 3 or 4 years. And when I do get sick, I turn into a giant baby, and nobody wants that. Trust me. So thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. I am your host, Rue. You have been listening to the Astrocast. Clear skies.